And similar arguments have been heard about the madrasas of the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, and governments under pressure, particularly from Western donor agencies and the United States, have pledged to reform them. Well, I think it's precisely this sort of stereotypical image that we have of madrasas that this book dispels. There is no doubt that the madrasa suffers today from a serious public relations problem. It's little understood, and it has become a symbol of extremism. It has been caricatured in this way, and in so doing, it has further complicated our attempt to understand Islam. I think it is the singular achievement of Muhammad Akram Nadwi that he counters such misunderstandings by providing the first full exposition that we have of the daily life of a madrasa student. In so doing, he provides for us a rounded picture, a fuller picture, one which suggests that it's more complex than these stereotypes would hold, one that says that the madrasa is intellectually challenging, spiritually charged, and not antiquated or destined to be out of touch with the modern world. That in a way, teachers and students together are working in a way to sustain and to renew Muslim society. Prior to madrasa life, we had to rely on the descriptions of Muslim historians, the glimpse of travelers, the accounts of Orientalists, and a small number of anthropological studies to give us a sense of what the place of the madrasa in Muslim life. One 15th century historian, for example, tells us that there were 23 madrasas in Mecca prior to the modern times, and a document of the Ottoman period tells us that it flourished in this period. A Dutch Orientalist gave us a very clear description of the madrasa in Mecca in the late 19th century. And he said, however, that it had declined as an institution to the point where once grand buildings were now deserted, abandoned, and that the word itself, madrasa, had just simply become the word to describe a house near the mosque. Well, I suspect that although this Orientalist was clever, that in fact he had missed a great deal of what was going on. By way of contrast, Dr. Nadwi's account, in this sense, is the best of participant observation. It reports on the structure of higher madrasa education, but it also imparts the ambiance, the intellectual excitement, the enthusiasm that occurs within the madrasa. Teachers unforgettably appear in this book in various portraits. Teachers not always careful with the way they dress or their appearance, sometimes impatient, but indisputably learned and indisputably generous with their knowledge. It's also reassuring to find that however motivated they are, I was pleased to see that students remain students. They were reluctant to get up in the morning, they're argumentative, they're bored with grammar, teased one another over sporting rivalries, concerned with the standards were slipping, and yet they themselves skimmed some of the readings. Students are students everywhere, even in the madrasa. But yet, the environment was much more cultured, I think, than what we've seen in the typical Western school or college, with poetry and literary criticism, a common entertainment. More importantly, the calls to prayer punctuated the daily life of the madrasa students, as has been done in all Muslim societies and across the world. They begin a very long day with the dawn prayer, attend classes from 8 a.m., perform the midday prayer, rest in the afternoon, and after lunch, pray the Asr prayer in the late afternoon, and then engage in a combination of entertainment and study. And they perhaps retire by 1 a.m. to rise again several hours later for the dawn prayer. If only my own students were as diligent and as hardworking as this. I think they're used to such late hours, but for entirely different reasons. So in describing this ritually marked routine, Dr. Nadwi reminds us that the acquisition of knowledge is an integral part of worship. It's not surprising, therefore, that the most concrete impression that emerges from this book is the level of intellectual curiosity that goes on in the madrasa. This cuts to the core of one of the criticisms of madrasas today. Many object to the curriculum itself, but most object to the pedagogy, to the way teaching occurs. That is to say, the argument that all teaching is by rote learning, memorization, and that is a very tight, narrow confine of scholarship. Well, I think that what we see, and instead that this type of learning, the rote, etc., is meant to reinforce authoritarianism, or at least to enhance the ability of radicals to recruit the students of the madrasa. This book shows, by way of contrast, that students who are being trained in the religious sciences, the Quran, Hadith, Fiqh, Tasawwuf, Arabic, display well-honed skills of interpretation and judgment. The parameters are different from the kind of knowledge or schooling that we would think of as liberal education. But it is clear that working within this structured framework allows for focused rules of engagement, intellectual engagement. As Dr. Nadwi shows, students are perfectly capable of questioning the competence of scholars in one field while admiring their contributions in another, or suggesting that their own train of thought leads to a variant conclusion without questioning the validity of the basic inquiry. So, quite contrary again to the stereotype, a whole form of intellectual engagement emerges.